I'm Naoma Prescott, 78 years old, and until last winter, I spent every morning sipping ginger tea beneath the bay window of my Victorian house on Maple Hill Street, the place my husband and I poured our lives into for over 4 decades. But everything changed the night the basement flooded and I slipped on the cellar stairs, breaking my hip and sending me straight into the hospital. Now I wake up each morning in the guest room of my daughter's house surrounded by neutral colors and careful silences. The morning light barely touches this north-facing room, and even the closet feels like it's only half mine. It's not that I'm ungrateful, but at this age, you can feel when a place doesn't welcome you. And no matter how often Karen calls it home, it never quite feels like mine. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and tap that like button if you've ever found yourself relying on others more than you ever expected. I've always been early to rise. It's the kind of habit that never leaves you. After nearly 40 years as a small-town veterinarian, animals don't wait for good weather or perfect timing when a dog's paw is bleeding or a horse refuses its oats. You go even if it's below freezing. Like it was that night, it hit -23. The coldest it had been in Bloyd in a decade. I remember hearing the water rushing from the basement pipes and trying to shut off the main valve before the steps turned to ice. I never made it to the valve. I woke up on the floor, my hip screaming. Neighbor Dolores found me the next morning, and thank God she did after the surgery. Karen offered her guest room until the house could be repaired. I said yes, thinking it would be a few weeks, maybe a month. 4 months later, the house is gutted, the floor stripped, the wiring shot. The insurance company keeps delaying payouts, and the contractor finds something new every week lately. Karen started suggesting I sell the place entirely and move into something more manageable, she says. Her husband, Eric, nods along, always ready with a grin and a solution. He sells medication for a living and somehow always sounds like he's pitching something each morning. I try to keep my routines. I lean on my cane and make my way to the kitchen early before the house wakes up. I fix oatmeal with cinnamon and apples, just how Harold liked it, and use the blue mug Weston gave me last Christmas. Dark blue with stars and a note in his handwriting that said, "Because you always show me the way, Grandma." Those quiet moments are my peace. Until the footsteps start. Karen in her tailored pantsuit, coffee in hand, already talking about the day's listings, and Eric always popping in with big ideas and too many questions. Our conversations repeat like clockwork. She asks about the insurance company. I tell her. They're still reviewing. She suggests selling the house. I deflect politely. She offers to call the adjuster or put me in touch with Eric's lawyer or financial advisor, and every offer comes wrapped in a smile. But under it, I feel something tighten every time. Lately, Eric's been more curious than usual about the details of my health, my medications, my will things he never cared about before. But the one person who makes this place bearable is Weston. He's 12 and curious and kind. He asks real questions and actually listens when I tell him stories about the animals I treated or the time Harold and I nursed a baby owl back to health last week. He asked when I'd be going home, and I told him. Hopefully soon. He looked down at his plate and whispered that he hoped so too, that he missed the garden and the attic and the way I always let him stay up late to stargaze. I told him the repairs were just taking longer than expected, but something about the way he looked at me made me wonder what else he'd overheard that I hadn't. Later that week, I was setting out my afternoon tea when Eric came home early unannounced. He rarely did. Karen was still out with clients, and Weston wouldn't be back from school for another hour. Eric wandered into the kitchen, flipping through the mail with one hand and loosening his tie with the other. He gave me that practiced grin of his, the one he probably used to charm doctors into signing contracts. Thought I'd grab a bite between meetings, he said, already reaching into the fridge. How's your hip today? Better, I replied, watching as he pulled out cold cuts and started assembling a sandwich. Did you hear anything new from the contractor? They're still waiting on the insurance adjuster to finalize the estimate, he said, not looking up. But I found someone new to look at the heating system. Turns out your boiler's way out of date. Might be time to replace it. I frowned. We replaced it 5 years ago. Harold handled it. We still have the warranty. Eric paused, then gave a light chuckle. Huh, that guy said it was over 15 years old. Maybe someone fooled you back then. I didn't answer. Something about the way he said it didn't sit right. He set his sandwich down and turned toward me. Have you updated your will since Harold passed? That stopped me. Yes? 3 years ago. Why? He shrugged like it was nothing. Just thinking ahead. You know how it goes. People leave money to animal shelters or causes they barely remember. I'd hate to see your legacy go to waste. My affairs are in order, I said, steady and calm. Mr. Finch has everything documented. Eric's smile tightened. Finch, that old guy's still practicing. He's got to be in his 80s by now. He's 73, I corrected. Sharp as ever. He nodded, but didn't push further. A moment later, he grabbed his plate and left for his office upstairs. I stood there in the quiet hands resting on the edge of the counter. The conversation hadn't lasted more than a few minutes, but it left me uneasy. I couldn't put my finger on it, but his sudden concern over my health, my home, my will, it all felt out of place. By the time I left to pick up Weston from school, the afternoon air had turned brisk. It was a 15-minute walk, enough to stretch my legs and clear my thoughts. Weston spotted me from across the courtyard and ran up, grinning, his backpack bouncing with each step. Guess what he beamed? Mr. Donovan picked my bird migration project to be in the school fair. I smiled, hugging him gently. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. On the walk home, he explained his research in detail, how some birds travel thousands of miles without stopping, how he'd traced their routes on maps. His excitement was contagious. That evening, he asked if I'd help him lay out the project display. We sat together at the kitchen table, cutting paper borders, arranging printouts, and labeling photos. It reminded me of the science fairs Karen once entered back when she was his age, back when she still dreamed of becoming a wildlife vet. Karen and Eric came home late. They walked in mid-discussion about her upcoming birthday party. 30 people at least, she said, tossing her coat over the back of a chair. Clients, colleagues, maybe even that photographer from Channel 4. I looked up from the table. What can I do to help? Nothing, Karen said lightly. We've got it covered. You just enjoy the evening. Later that night, Weston came into my room before bed. He stood in the doorway, quiet. Grandma, are you happy here? I looked at him, surprised by the question. I'm happy I get to see you every day. He shook his head. That's not really what I asked. I hesitated. It's not always about being happy, sweetheart. Sometimes it's about being where you're needed. I need you, he said, serious and soft. I don't want you to go anywhere. But I hear them talk. It's not right. He leaned in and hugged me, arms tight. I held him back, a lump rising in my throat. I didn't have answers for him, but I knew this. I had to protect this boy. The next morning, Karen was in a rush again. She rattled off guest lists and caterer instructions, then paused to ask if I'd reconsidered wearing the blue dress she'd picked out for me. I prefer my own, thank you, I said, sipping my tea. Mother, she sighed. This is 2025. Women your age wear whatever they want. I smiled gently. And I'm one of them. Just then, the phone rang. Karen checked the screen, her face tightening before she stepped out of the room. Yes, Mr. Holdway, I understand. Yes, before the end of the month. She came back minutes later with a forced smile. Just a nervous buyer. But I wasn't convinced. Over the past weeks, I'd noticed more hushed conversations, late-night arguments, strained expressions when they didn't think I was looking. The night before, I'd overheard something sharp. "You said the market would bounce back," Karen hissed from the living room. "We just have to hold out," Eric replied. "We're only a few payments behind. The bank hasn't moved yet." Karen's voice cracked. "We've lost almost everything. And if your plan doesn't work, I didn't stay to hear the rest." That afternoon, Eric came home again while Karen was out. I was reading in the living room when I heard the door slam and his heavy steps cross the hall. "Karen," he called out. "She's out showing a house I said setting down my book." He looked surprised, maybe even annoyed. His suit was wrinkled and a sheen of sweat clung to his forehead. Without much small talk, he headed upstairs. Moments later, I heard his office door shut and low murmurs through the walls. He was on a call, but something in his voice sounded tight. Rushed. Later, he came back down, acting casual. "How's the hip?" he asked. "Healing well." "Good, good," he nodded. "How's your blood pressure? Any palpitations lately? Headaches?" I looked at him puzzled. "Why do you ask?" "Just thinking about your health," he said lightly. "At your age, you've got to be careful. Heart problems sneak up on people." "I take care of myself," I said, voice steady. "Always have." He gave a half shrug. "I was reading about a new medication. Good for joints. Might mention it to your doctor. Starts with a D, I think." I nodded slowly. "Let me know if you remember the name." He glanced at his watch. "Got to run. Meeting downtown." Once he left, I sat very still. None of it sat right. Eric had never shown this much concern, not for my joints, my heart, or my health. Not until recently. Hours later, I went upstairs to grab a sweater. The house felt colder than usual. As I passed Eric's office, I noticed the door ajar, unusual for him. Inside, the desk looked untouched except for one small box. I stepped closer. It had a pharmaceutical logo on the side. The label read dioxin. My stomach turned. That medication was only prescribed to Harold during his last year, strictly controlled, carefully dosed. It could be fatal if misused. I heard the front door open downstairs and quickly backed out. Weston was home from school. He walked in, dropped his backpack, and sighed. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. Is it normal for parents to fight all the time?" I looked at him and didn't answer right away. He went on. "They fight every night now. Last night Dad said we could lose the house. And they were talking about you." I stayed quiet. "They said you should just sell the house. Mom said you'd be better off in a nursing home. And Dad said something weird about your will." He trailed off, eyes lowered. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said softly. "Thank you for telling me." But something inside me had shifted. I didn't know what was coming yet. Only that something was, and it was getting closer. That evening, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the small armchair near the window, a blanket draped across my legs, listening to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the faint creaks of the house settling. My room was dark, except for the soft glow of the hallway nightlight slipping under the door. Somewhere around midnight, I made my way quietly to the kitchen. The tile floor was cold against my slippers as I reached for a glass. I stood there in the dim light sipping water when I heard their voices. Karen and Eric were in the living room. "You said the market would bounce back?" Karen's voice was tight. "We just need more time," Eric replied. 2 more weeks and the bank will be breathing down our necks." Her voice rose. "We're already 3 payments behind Eric. If your plan doesn't work," his voice dropped low, but I still caught the words. "It'll work. It has to." I backed out of the hallway before they saw me, careful not to let my cane bump the wall. The next morning, Karen was all smiles again, rattling off party plans over coffee, like nothing had happened. Eric offered to bring me a special vitamin blend for my joints, said he'd picked it up at work. I thanked him and quietly set it aside. That afternoon, Weston came home from school looking unusually tired. He dropped his backpack and leaned against the kitchen counter. "Long day," he muttered. I set out a turkey sandwich and an apple. "Tell me about it." He shrugged. "Science test. Then Mr. Donovan had me help set up the aquarium." "I don't mind helping, but—" He trailed off. I watched him carefully. "Something bothering you, honey?" He looked down at the sandwich. "Is it normal for parents to fight every night?" I paused, unsure what to say. They didn't used to. Now it's all they do, and it's always about money. Last night, Dad said they might lose the house if something doesn't change. He glanced up, eyes searching mine. "And they keep talking about you." "What do they say?" He hesitated. "Dad said you could solve everything if you'd just sell your house. And Mom, she said maybe it's time you went into a home." I set my glass down carefully. "You shouldn't have to worry about those things, Weston." "I know, but I do." He picked at his apple for a moment, then looked up again. "I heard Dad say something strange last night. He said, 'If this doesn't work, there won't be any way out.'" The silence stretched between us. That night, I barely touched my dinner. Karen made roasted chicken with rosemary, and Eric poured sparkling water into fancy glasses like it was a holiday. When Weston excused himself to finish homework, I retreated early too. But I didn't go to bed. I sat by the window again, staring at the dark yard. At some point, I heard the soft creak of the hallway floorboards. Then a knock at my door. Mom Karen's voice, sweet and careful. I opened the door a crack. She smiled and held up a cup. "Chamomile tea. With honey and lavender. Thought it might help you sleep." I glanced at the nightstand. I already had some. "Oh." Her expression flickered. "Well, you can have another. This one's extra relaxing. Better not. I'll be up all night running to the bathroom." She gave a tight smile. "Suit yourself." When she left, I stood there for a long time. Then I quietly turned the lock. The next day was a blur of florists and caterers and folding chairs. Their house was being transformed for Karen's birthday party. Balloons, linen napkins, classical music from the speakers. Eric brought me a glass of bright cranberry-colored juice just before dinner. "Something special," he said. "Cranberry mint, a touch of lime. Great for circulation." I held the glass, but didn't drink. He watched me carefully. Wesley found me a few minutes later. He looked pale. "Grandma, can I talk to you?" "Upstairs?" We went to my room. He closed the door behind us. I heard them again. He whispered. My heart dropped. They were in Dad's office. I left my tablet in there by mistake. They didn't know I came back. "What did you hear?" He swallowed hard. Dad said, "It's done. He put something in your drink." Mom asked if it would look natural. He said, "Yeah. At her age, no one will question a heart attack." I sat down, gripping the armrest, the glass in my hand still full. "I don't know what to do," he said. I didn't know if I should tell anyone. "But I'm scared. I don't want anything to happen to you." I looked at him and nodded slowly. "You did the right thing." There was a knock at the door. Wesley Karen's voice annoyed. "The guests are here. Why are you two hiding?" "We'll be right out," I said quickly. "He's helping me with my necklace." We stood there, both of us listening to her footsteps fade down the hall. I turned to Weston. "Listen carefully. We're going to act normal. I'll try to leave without being noticed. If they ask, tell them I went upstairs for my medicine." He nodded, but his hands trembled. Downstairs, the house buzzed with music and laughter. Kira Karen stood near the dining room in a silver dress, laughing with clients. Eric was at the drink table, pouring champagne. He looked up when he saw me and smiled. "There she is," he called. "You ready for the toast?" "Maybe in a minute," I said. "I'm feeling a little lightheaded. I've got your drink right here." He held up the cranberry glass again. "Just take a few sips. It'll help." Before I could respond, Weston appeared behind him. "Grandma don't drink that." Eric turned, his smile vanishing. "Wesley, what are you doing down here?" "Grandma don't drink it," he repeated. "Please." Eric stepped toward him. "Go to your room, now." "It's okay," I said, stepping in. "He's just worried." "I really think you should sit and have something," Eric said again, pressing the glass forward. "I'll get some air first." "No need," he said, still smiling too wide. "You'll miss the toast." Then Weston's voice rang out louder than I'd ever heard it. "Grandma, get out of here." "Now." The whole kitchen stopped. A few guests turned to look. The waiters froze. One of the florists dropped a napkin roll. Eric's hand trembled slightly. I held up my hands. "Thank you, but I need to lie down. I'll be back for dessert." He stepped in front of the door. "She'll be disappointed if you miss her toast," he said quietly. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because it's important." I looked at the glass again, then at Weston, then back at Eric, and slowly set the drink down on the counter without touching it. Eric didn't move at first. He just stood there holding the glass like he wasn't sure what to do next. Weston stayed at my side, not saying a word, but his hand gripped mine tightly. "I'm going to get some air," I said again, steady as I could. "It's too warm in here." Eric looked past me toward the dining room, then back at the shattered glass on the floor. He bent to pick up the pieces with a paper towel from the counter, avoiding my eyes. "Be quick," he said. "The toast starts in 10. I nodded and stepped out into the hallway, Weston close behind. "Go back in," I whispered. "Stay near the guests. If anyone asks, say I went upstairs to rest." He looked up at me, hesitant. "Will you be okay?" "I'll be fine," I said, touching his shoulder. "Just stay where there are people." I moved quietly through the back hallway toward the stairs, then slipped up to my room. I kept a small canvas bag in the bottom drawer of my dresser. Just the basics: wallet, house keys, medication, the folder with insurance letters, and a few bills I'd tucked away when the bank statements started disappearing. I pulled on my coat and slid the bag over my shoulder. Downstairs, I could hear the hum of conversation rising again, the clink of glasses, someone laughing too loudly. I moved carefully down the back stairs toward the kitchen. There were 2 caterers plating appetizers and a younger man in a pressed shirt stirring something on the stove. They barely glanced at me, but just as I reached the back door, I heard my name. "There you are." Eric stepped into the kitchen from the hallway, still holding a drink. "I've been looking everywhere," he said. "Everyone's gathering for the toast." "I'm just stepping outside for a moment," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He walked toward me, smiling too wide. "Come on, just one sip. It's a celebration." Before I could respond, Weston's voice cut through the air like a strike of lightning. "You don't have to drink that, Grandma." He was standing behind Eric, pale and shaking. Eric turned sharply. "Wesley, go back to the party." "No," Weston said. "Don't drink it. Please." The room went still. The kitchen staff had stopped what they were doing. One of the waiters was watching with wide eyes. I stepped forward. "It's okay. He's just tired. We'll be upstairs in a minute." Eric's face twitched. "You're ruining the evening. Why are you so determined I drink this?" I asked. It's just a cranberry cocktail, isn't it? His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Wesley stepped closer. Grandma, leave now! Eric reached out, trying to calm the situation, but Weston shoved him with both hands. The glass hit the tile and shattered deep red liquid spreading across the floor. Eric grabbed Weston by the arm hard enough to make him flinch. What's wrong with you? Let him go, I said, stepping between them. He didn't let go right away. I said, let go. That's when Karen walked in. She stopped in the doorway, taking in the broken glass Weston's scared face, and me standing between them with my bag over my shoulder. What's going on? Her voice was sharp, like she was scolding a child. She looked at me, then Eric, then Weston. I didn't answer. Mom, she asked again. Why are you dressed to leave? I'm going to get some air, I said evenly. Too much noise. Karen stepped closer. What is this? You're causing a scene. You want to know what this is? I asked, still calm. Your husband tried to poison me. She blinked. I looked at Eric. What was in that drink? Dioxin. Eric's eyes darted toward the sink. Karen stared at me, stunned. That's ridiculous. No, it's not. Weston said, his voice shaking. I heard them last night. In the office. Karen's mouth opened. What are you talking about? You said it would look natural. That people would think it was just a heart attack. The room had gone completely silent. One of the caterers stepped back. A second waiter glanced toward the hallway, unsure whether to leave or stay. Eric's face turned red. He's a child. He misunderstood. You said you prepared the ground, Weston continued. You said she'd already shown symptoms. You made sure of it. Karen turned pale. Stop it. Wesley looked at her. You agreed to it. Karen stepped back like she'd been slapped. You were desperate, he said, voice small. You said it was the only way. Eric lunged toward Weston. That's enough. I moved fast, blocking his way. Don't touch him! He froze, breathing hard. Karen looked like she might collapse. Mom, she whispered. Please, we can explain. I'm done listening, I said. I'm leaving, and Weston's coming with me. Eric stepped in again. You're not taking my son. He's not safe here. You can't prove anything. There's a shattered glass on the floor, I said. Let's see what's in it. Let's ask the police. Karen's face broke. Please, but I didn't let her finish. Wesley, I said, holding out my hand. We're going. We walked past the frozen guests, past the candles and the trays of untouched desserts, past the neighbors and co-workers pretending they hadn't heard a thing, out into the dark yard, hand in hand. Wesley didn't say a word until we reached the sidewalk. Where are we going, to Neil's? I said. The veterinarian. Remember him? He nodded, clutching my hand. We walked through the cool evening, the buzz of the party fading behind us. QA, any sentence. 35. Words, no. Any new or misspelled name. No. Repeated idea from part 3. No. Neil opened the door after the third knock, still wearing his work scrubs glasses slightly askew. He looked at us, Wesley, with his small backpack, me in my coat, with a bag slung over my shoulder, and stepped aside without a word. We walked into the small living room. Books were scattered on the coffee table. The air smelled faintly of bergamot and dog shampoo. Sit, Neil said, clearing space on the couch. I'll make tea. I sank into the cushion and placed my bag beside me. Wesley sat close, his shoulders tense. Neither of us said much while Neil clinked dishes in the kitchen. When he returned with a tray, 3 mugs, and a plate of cookies, I finally exhaled. Thank you, I said, reaching for the cup. I didn't know where else to go. You don't have to explain, Neil said. You're safe here. Wesley's voice broke the quiet. They were going to poison her. My parents. Neil set his cup down slowly. What? He put something in her drink. I heard them talking last night in Dad's office. They didn't know I was there. Neil looked at me, then at Wesley. Are you sure? I nodded. He's sure. I heard it too. Not the conversation, but the pressure. The drinks. The pills in his office. What pills? Dioxin, I said. I saw the label. Prescription heart medication. Harold used to take it. Powerful stuff, even in small doses. Neil leaned forward. Was it opened? I don't know. But it wasn't mine. And I never asked for it. Neil tapped his fingers on his knee. This is serious, Naomi. You should go to the police. I know I said, but we don't have much. No drink to test. No video. Just Wesley's word. Wesley looked down. And they'll say I made it up. Or didn't understand. Neil paused. Then he turned to Wesley. Did you record anything? Their voices. Wesley hesitated. I think so. He pulled his phone from his pocket, brows furrowed. Last night, I opened the voice recorder app. I just let it run while I left the phone in the hallway. He tapped a few times, then held the phone out. We sat together listening. The sound was muffled, distant voices, some words lost. But a few phrases cut through clearly. It'll look natural. So, we prepared the ground. The toast, just a sip. Neil's jaw tightened. That's enough for an investigation. I also took pictures, Wesley added, of the medicine in Dad's drawer. And the notepad. He'd written initials and dosages. He scrolled and handed the phone to Neil. The photos were clear. A bottle labeled dioxin. A handwritten label, NP, 0.25. Another page with scribbled notes and times. My heart pounded. Seeing it all laid out in front of me, proof it made my hands shake. I didn't know he'd written that, I said. Your initials, your dosage, Neil said quietly. There's no innocent explanation for that. We sat in silence. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. I reached over and squeezed Wesley's hand. You were brave, I whispered. I just didn't want to lose you, he said, voice trembling. Neil stood. We're going to the police. Now. You both stay here. I'll drive. We arrived at the station just before 10. The young woman at the front desk took our names, asked us to wait. 30 minutes later, a man with tired eyes and a clipboard came out to meet us. Detective Ramirez, he said. Come with me. He led us into a small room with 2 chairs and a round table. He spoke gently, asking for the full story. I told him everything moving in after the accident, the arguments, the drink, the confrontation at the party. Wesley sat still beside me, only speaking when asked. His voice was quiet but firm. He showed the detective the recording, the photos, the notes. Ramirez listened carefully, took notes, asked a few questions, then sat back. This is a serious allegation, he said, and what you've brought us is very compelling, but we'll still need to follow protocol. Search the house, interview your daughter and son-in-law, verify the medication records, analyze the handwriting. What do we do in the meantime? I asked. We can't go back there. You won't have to, he said. We'll place you in protective housing, temporarily, just until we gather enough. That night we stayed in a city-owned safe apartment on the edge of town. It was plain, but clean. 2 beds, a kitchenette, a door that locked tight. Wesley fell asleep almost instantly. I didn't. I sat at the table, the phone in my hand. Karen had called 5 times, left a voicemail. Then a message. Mom, please call me. This is all a misunderstanding. I turned the phone face down. The next day, Ramirez called. They were beginning a formal investigation. He asked for Wesley's school schedule in case they needed to speak to him again. He assured me an officer would drive us to and from the motel for anything essential. 2 days passed in a blur. On the third, Ramirez called again. They're denying everything he said, claiming the audio was taken out of context. Edric says the pills are for work samples, and the note with my name? He says it's coincidence. My hand gripped the phone tighter. What now? We'll keep pressing, Ramirez said. But unless one of them cracks, it'll take time. We're watching the house now. Don't worry. That evening, as I stirred soup on the stove, Wesley sat at the table flipping through his notebook. I remembered something else he said suddenly. A few weeks ago, Dad gave you that tea, the mint one. The next morning you felt dizzy. I paused. I did. He nodded. And the pasta night. You barely ate, but you said your heart felt funny. I set the spoon down and turned toward him. You think he was testing it? He nodded slowly. We didn't talk much after that, but I made a promise to myself. Whatever it took, I would make sure my grandson stayed safe. The call came from Detective Ramirez on a quiet Thursday morning. They want to meet, he said. Both your daughter and her husband. I sat at the motel table, my tea growing cold beside me. Why? They say it's a misunderstanding. They want a chance to explain themselves. I didn't answer right away. Outside the window, Wesley was tossing a tennis ball to the shelter puppy we'd adopted just days before. I could hear his quiet laugh through the screen. We'll arrange it under controlled conditions, Ramirez said. Public place. Officers nearby. The meeting will be recorded. I nodded slowly. All right. The cafe he suggested was downtown quiet, mostly locals. I wore my navy wool coat and took nothing but my phone and ID. Wesley stayed with a child services counselor just a few blocks away. He didn't argue when I kissed the top of his head and told him I'd be back soon. Ramirez met me at the entrance. They're already inside, he said. Table in the back corner. You'll have a panic button under your side. Just press it if anything feels off. I nodded and walked in. Karen and Eric sat across from each other at a small round table near the ivy-covered windows. Karen's eyes were swollen. Eric wore a pressed blazer and his usual salesman's smile. Karen stood when she saw me. Mom! I didn't embrace her. She sat back down slowly. Eric gestured toward the third chair. Thank you for coming, he said. I sat and rested my hands on the table. Get to it. Eric chuckled lightly the way people do when they want to pretend nothing's broken. This whole thing, he began, has spiraled out of control. There's been a misunderstanding. You mean the audio recording of you discussing how to slip something into my drink, I asked? His smile froze for just a second. Karen reached across the table. We were scared. The house. The mortgage. We thought you'd help. I already offered help, I said quietly. What you wanted was control. Karen's hand dropped back to her lap. Eric leaned in. Let's not turn this into something ugly. It already is. He cleared his throat. Look, the dioxin is part of my job. Samples. The notes were written in your handwriting, with my initials, and a dose. Karen's face crumpled. Mom, please. We didn't mean to hurt you. We were desperate. I stared at her. You served me tea you knew might make me dizzy. You asked about my will. You brought me a drink you knew I hadn't asked for. When did any of that feel like desperation, not intention? Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Eric sighed and sat back. You don't have any real evidence. It's all speculation. I didn't look at him. I have the tape. I have the photos. I have my symptoms after meals you prepared. He shrugged. You're an old woman. Old people get dizzy. And I'm not alone anymore, I said. Wesley heard you. He recorded what you said. He saw the pills. He knows what was happening. Karen's shoulders slumped. Her eyes filled with tears. We didn't want to do it, she whispered. I tried to stop him. But you didn't, I said, softly. You just went along with it. Eric's jaw clenched. This is a waste of time. I looked at him. Do you think I'd come here without the police listening? He stopped. Ramirez stepped forward from behind the nearby bookshelf, badge in hand. 2 officers moved from their spots near the front. Eric Landon, Karen Prescott. We have a warrant to search your property, Ramirez said calmly. We'll also be bringing you in for questioning. Karen covered her mouth. Eric stood knocking over his chair. You tricked us, he snapped. You senile old, watch your tone, one of the officers warned. Don't bother, I said, standing. You already showed me who you are. Karen looked at me. Mom, I'm so sorry. Please, don't take Wesley from us. You did that yourselves, I said. They were escorted out the door. As it closed behind them, I sat back down and placed my trembling hands on the table. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding myself together. Ramirez sat across from me. That was enough, he said. We got it all. He admitted to hiding evidence. She didn't deny the plan. This will help the case. I nodded. He paused. Your grandson's going to need stability. I know. You're ready for that. Yes, I said quietly. I am. Later that day, I returned to the Child Services office. Wesley looked up from a jigsaw puzzle when I entered. When he saw my face, he stood. They arrested them, I said. He didn't speak at first. Then he walked over and wrapped his arms around me. I thought I'd feel better, he whispered. I smoothed his hair back. That'll come. Just not yet. We were assigned temporary housing while the trial moved forward. It wasn't much, 2 rooms and a kitchenette, but it was ours. In the evenings, I made us dinner. We played cards, read aloud. Slowly, Wesley started sleeping through the night again. One morning, I found him sitting by the window staring out at the street. Do you think Mom really would have let it happen? He asked. I sat beside him. I don't know. He nodded, looking down. I miss who she used to be. I rested my hand on his shoulder. So do I. A week later, the court granted me temporary guardianship. Ramirez called that same afternoon. We finished the search, he said. Found the bottle of dioxin. Multiple entries in Eric's notebook with your initials. Even a practice schedule times dosages. He paused. We have what we need. There will be a trial. That night, as Wesley slept, I took out my old journal. I wrote for a long time. Not about betrayal or fear or even grief. Just one sentence. He saved my life, and now I will build him one. The first time Wesley called the new place home, we were unpacking a cardboard box of books into the living room shelves. He held up one of Harold's old field guides, battered spine taped twice, and said, This one stays here. It belongs. I paused and looked over. You mean here in the house? He nodded. Here, with us. It had been just over 3 weeks since the court granted me full temporary custody. Renovations at my old Victorian had finished 2 days prior, and we moved in that same night. The floors still smelled faintly of fresh varnish. The garden, overgrown when I returned, had already begun to bloom again. Just like us. Each day, I tried to bring back something familiar. The old blue armchair from storage. My recipe box with Harold's scribbled notes. A new coat of paint in Wesley's room, the color he picked himself, pale green, like spring moss. He adjusted faster than I expected. Every morning, he packed his school bag on his own. Every evening, he helped with dishes. But sometimes I'd catch him at the window gaze, distant, a question hanging in the air he didn't quite know how to ask. One Saturday morning, after he finished his science worksheet, he came into the kitchen and sat at the table. "Grandma," he said, "do you think I'll ever see Mom again?" I rinsed my hands and sat across from him. "Yes," I said quietly. "When the time is right." He looked down at the table. "What if I don't want to?" "That's up to you." He didn't say anything after that, just nodded and went outside to play fetch with the puppy. Later that afternoon, Neil Brody came by with a crate of fresh vegetables from a client's farm. He stayed for dinner, stir-fry with garden squash and rice, and afterward helped Wesley build a bird feeder for the backyard oak tree. "He's different now," Neil said as we sat on the porch. "Steadier. You've given him something to hold on to." I looked out toward the tree where Wesley was stringing up his feeder with quiet focus. "He saved me first," I said. The trial came 2 months after the arrest. The courtroom was quiet, fluorescent lit, almost too clean. Karen wore a gray dress. Eric a navy blazer and pale expression. Neither looked directly at Wesley or me. The prosecution presented everything: audio photographs, medical testimony. The judge listened closely. When they played the recording of Karen and Eric discussing my death, the courtroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Karen cried through most of it. Eric stayed still, eyes fixed on the table. Wesley held my hand through every session. He didn't ask to testify, but the court admitted his statements and the evidence he'd collected. When it was time for sentencing, he asked to attend. "I need to hear it," he said. "All of it." We sat on the right side of the courtroom. I wore my navy dress, the same one I'd worn at Harold's retirement dinner. Wesley sat tall beside me, shoulders back. The judge sentenced Eric to 15 years for attempted murder. Karen received 8 with the possibility of parole in 5. Neither of them looked at us when the verdict was read. As they were let out, Karen turned once. Her eyes found Wesley's. He didn't look away. Afterward, in the quiet of our car, Wesley stared at the courthouse steps. "I still don't understand how she could have done it," he said. "She used to make me pancakes in the shape of stars." I reached for his hand. "She was scared," I said. "But fear doesn't excuse harm. She made a choice." He nodded, eyes wet. "I just wish I didn't miss her." "It's okay to miss who she used to be," I told him. "That doesn't mean you have to forget what she did." That night, we watched the sunset from the porch. Wesley had brought out his notebook and was sketching birds again. Robins, cardinals, a sparrow with streaked wings. The feeder Neil helped him build was already attracting them. "You know," Wesley said, glancing up, "I might want to be a vet. Like you." I smiled. "You'd be a good one." He looked pleased but shy about it. "You think so? I do. You're patient. Curious. You listen." We sat in the quiet for a while, the puppy curled at our feet. A breeze rustled the oak leaves overhead. "I'm glad we came back here," he said finally. "It feels like we can start over." I nodded. "We are starting over. Together." He reached for my hand, still small, but stronger than it used to be. "Do you think things will ever feel normal again?" he asked. I thought about that, about trust lost and rebuilt, about how grief doesn't disappear, just changes shape. "I think they'll feel new," I said, "and maybe that's even better." The weeks after the sentencing felt like someone had turned down the noise. No more sudden knocks at the door. No more whispered phone calls behind closed doors. Just quiet mornings, warm toast, and the sound of Wesley's voice drifting through the house. We'd gotten used to the rhythm of our new life school homework walks with the puppy in the garden. Every now and then, Wesley would ask if he could write to Karen. I never said no. He needed his own way through it, and I knew better than to shut the door on a child's love, even when it's tangled. Sometimes he got a letter back. They were short, polite, full of the kind of things adults say when they're trying not to cry on the page. But he read every word carefully like it mattered. And maybe it did. I met with Mr. Finch at the end of May. We finalized the new will, no inheritance for Karen or Eric. Instead, I set up a trust in Wesley's name, one that would carry him through school, college, and whatever dreams came after. A portion went to the local animal shelter, another to fund scholarships at the veterinary college where I once studied. When Mr. Finch slid the final paperwork across the table, he looked at me kindly. "You've built something strong here, Naomi. Something that'll last." Back at the house, Wesley had dragged the old telescope out to the garden. The bird feeder he built with Neil now hosted an entire family of robins. I watched him make notes in a small blue notebook, his brow furrowed in focus. "You think they'll come back next year?" he asked me as I joined him on the bench. "They might," I said. "Birds remember where they felt safe." He looked at me, then back at the tree. "I think we're kind of like that too." I didn't say anything, just rested my hand over his. Some days, I still miss the version of my daughter who used to call me after every exam or bring home stray cats in her backpack. That version of Karen is gone now, buried under too many bad choices. But the boy sitting beside me, he's become something steady, stronger than any root in that old oak tree. Wesley's story won't be simple. He'll carry this with him the way we all carry our hardest truths. But he's not carrying it alone. We end each night with a small ritual. A cup of tea for me, a slice of apple for the puppy, and a quiet moment on the porch where the sky turns pink just above the rooftops. It's not much, but it's ours. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever had to start over or protect someone you love, I hope you know you're not alone. Feel free to share this with someone who needs to hear it. Or just take a breath. You made it through.